Cool. Alright, well, I've matched both the feet together by using the curves, and I've done a play blast, and it looks something like this. Okay, so we've got something pretty nice and smooth going. Now we want to do the same thing, only we want to do that with the hands. Now, to me, I like his left hand more than his right hand. It's got that really nice kind of drag on it as it comes up through. The hand is kind of following the elbow and then flipping out in the front so that it can follow the elbow back. So what I want to try to do is match that to the right hand, and I also want to do a little bit more work with his left hand because it doesn't have that nice follow through at the back end of the stride. So basically we just want to try to get that real nice follow through on the hand going all the way through the cycle. So let's close this down and take a look at this left hand. Alright, so now what we notice is that starting up from 1 down through until about 13, it looks pretty good. And then, let's see, this would be, I believe, rotate Y. Okay, so rotate Y. This is, as it goes through 13, this is the part where the hand has the most swing coming through. So I think we would want the drag on Y to be the most at that point. So we want to make this curve nice and smooth so we get that great curve, but then we notice it comes back pretty quickly. So if we just isolate rotate Y, we can see where the problem with the curve is. It's this one that's throwing off the curve. We want it to be just a nice smooth cycle. So we can just we can either bring it down to here, or we can just blow away the key altogether. So it really doesn't matter. We'll just go through the rest of this and see what's going to make the nicest final curve. So now, at the point when it's coming back up, now we want it to be dragging the other way. And it is bet 25, but it seems to take it a long time to do so. It should really start its drag maybe here at 21. It should be dragging back a little bit more. We can bring that handle down and bring this handle down and make that curve prettier. So now we want it to be dragging like that, and that really is what it's doing. So now what we can do is we can just run a quick play blast from this side to see how that hand looks, if the drag is what we like it to be. It's not bad, but it still looks like there's a little hiccup coming through this section right here. There's a problem with the spacing, so it doesn't look entirely smooth. So let's isolate that. That could also be a function of the other rotation keys. So really it looks like it's happening right around here, right around frame 18. So let's look at all the rotate keys. Yeah, we can see what's happening. It's the rotate Z. So if we take this rotate Z here at frame 17 and just sort of put it back a little bit more in line, and then just take the rest of these keys and just sort of make them a little nicer. And then we take another look at rotate Y. That looks okay, but I think this curve again could be a little bit smoother. So when you're doing curves like overlaps, they can be a little smoother, and just have a little less sharpness to them, because when it comes to cycles, or overlap or drag, it tends to be sort of a smooth thing because it's not a premeditated, thought out action or a muscular action. It's just the weight of the hand acting naturally as it moves through space. So we can make these curves kind of a little nicer. What we can even do is blow away some keys so that the curves are really smooth. So now let's take a look at how this looks here. So yeah, so we're getting that really nice curve. We're getting that really nice overlap there in the hands. Okay. So now that hand still looks a little unnatural, not because it's not overlapping nicely, but just because of the shape of the hand itself. So now that we're getting into these details, let's give his hand a little bit more of a natural feel. Okay, so that is done by using the hand icon here in the GUI. Generally, the most natural look for a hand is for the fingers to be kind of curled, and for the pinky to be curled the most, and then the ring finger a little bit less, the middle finger a little bit less, and then the pointer even less, maybe just a very small amount of curl. Now what this is called splay, and on most high-end rigs it's a natural function, but when you're using rigs like this, sometimes you just have to put it in there yourself, but that's okay. And so that may be a little too much, and the fingers look a little too spread out to feel natural, because when someone's hands are at their sides, then those fingers don't really spread out too much. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little less curl on this one here, and then I think what we can do is we can bring all the bases out a little bit, so it doesn't look like he's making a fist. It just looks like he's kind of doing just sort of a normal kind of splayed hand. Okay. Take a look at, when you're watching your reference animation from movies, just take a look at what just at what hands are doing and how this splay is acted out. Okay, so now I'm just going to bring in the ring finger and the pinky in a little bit more, and then for the thumb, we'll just make that a little bit, bring that in a little bit closer, and then put the tip out a little bit. Okay, so now if you look at his left hand, it's got more of a natural loose hanging feel than his right hand does. Okay, now another thing we can do that'll really help this animation, and again, it's a detail, but it will really help, is to take these curls and animate the curl so that it curls a little bit less at the front of the stride and a little bit more as it comes down to the back, and that'll just make the animation look a little bit more natural. Okay, so now when I want to go do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the animation on the hand node itself. Okay, now it doesn't appear that there's a way to get the entire hand to show up. Oh, here it is. Okay, I'm sorry, no, this is the left index finger. So we noticed that 22 is the frame that I've made this the more natural hand pose on. So I want to blow away all the other keys. Okay, and so now that hand is going to hold that pose all the way through. So I just need to do that on the other fingers, and I can do that like this. So when you're working with mine, it's pretty easy to get these things moving pretty quickly. Okay, so now, oh, and don't forget the thumb. Alright, so now we're going to have that nice hand pose all the way through, as you can see. Okay, so what I'm going to want to do is, as it comes through right around frame 10, I'm going to want to tighten that all up a little bit around 10, have it be its tightest around 20, and then loosen up around 28. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, I've added the overlap on the wrists and double checked the curves with each other to make sure they look pretty good, pretty opposite, and pretty even. And I've also added just a very small amount of curve in the fingers themselves. So if I pick this finger here, you can see when you look at it that it's loosening up through the beginning, tightening up through the back of the swing, and then loosening up again. And so we'll do a quick play blast and see how it looks. So you can see there that there's sort of just a nice lilt to the hand, and that the fingers are sort of opening and closing. It's a subtle touch, but it's nice in a walk. Now what I notice when looking at this is that it just appears that that drag in the wrist is just a little too much. It looks unnatural, it looks forced. The timing is right and the feel of it is right, but I think the strength is just a little too much. So what I'm going to want to do is go back into it, and I believe this is rotate Y. And what I want to do is I just want to tone the whole thing down a little bit. So I'm going to select the whole thing, hit R for scale, put my cursor right in the middle of the whole thing, and just tighten it all up a little bit. And then you'll notice as you change the scale of the curves how sometimes the tangents are affected. So once you've lessened that up, you may want to just spline them all to make sure they still look nice. And sometimes you still need to go in and change them individually. Oh, I picked this handle W for translate so I can middle mouse affect it like that. Okay, so you may have to do a little fine tuning on it. But now as I play it, it just feels like you can still see the drag, but it's not quite so overdone. As a matter of fact, maybe I just want to bring it down a little bit more even. Now when I play it, it's nice and subtle, but it's still in there. Okay? So now, what I notice in the playback as well is that if you look at it, it looks like that right arm is sort of bouncing when it hits the back end of its rotation. And when I look at the curves here, I can see, yep, on the rotate Z, it's got that bounce. So I want to flatten those tangents, and then really, I think I can just kill all these keys. And then that'll make for a much smoother kind of swing. There we go. Much nicer. So now I just want to double check. Do the same thing over here with these keys as well on the left arm. So we've got an even thing happening. And I'll go down to that. Pick the other rotate X, do the same thing. And now we should have a really nice smooth animation. Oh, we also need to pick this left wrist and lessen the rotate on Y for this one as well to match the other one. So I'm going to R for scale, bring it down a little bit, re-spline it, and now we're looking pretty good, I think. Okay, so now I think this one was not quite. This one I think I scaled down a little too much. What I'd really like, because we're losing our drag here on the left hand as it swings back. So I'm just going to want to affect these tangents and pull them down a little bit so we get a little bit more drag in there. Or if I want, I can always set a key right there and just pull this down a bit just to get a little bit more of that drag in there. Okay, so now it feels like it's doing what it should be doing. Almost. This needs to come down a bit more as well, so we can feel that, because we want to feel that drag as soon as that hand comes across the top of its arc. We want to feel that drag starting to happen. Sorry, rotate X is not part of it, but rotate. We can also rotate it in Z a little bit, and that'll help us from the side view to get that feeling of drag. There we go. Let's just see what it's done to that rotate Z. Okay, pretty up that curve a bit. Okay, now it feels. Okay, so now we've given it a little more drag on his left hand in Z, and that feels about right. But the right hand we've gone too subtle, and we can see it in the playback here on the left. So just mainly right here in this one part where it kicks back right there. That's where we want to give it a little bit more rotate Z to bring it up like that, and a little more rotate Y to bring it up like that. Okay, and then we just want to smooth out the curves so they seem nice. And now it looks pretty good from there. Let's take a look at it from here. Okay, it's got a nice feel to it, and it's basically our man walking. So to me, this feels like a pretty good finished first walk. We still have some work to do to give him some more naturalism and maybe a little attitude, but for now, that's just a good basic walk. So now we've got our basic walk completed. What we want to do now is give our man a little bit more of a natural motion. And this is where I want to start talking about unpinning things and getting opposing action happening internally through different parts of the body, all for the purpose of giving him a more natural feel. So let's just start by doing a play blast of just this basic walk. And what we're going to do is we're going to hang on to this play blast, and then once we've put a little more motion in him and a little more naturalness, we're going to play the two together so you can see how quickly and easily you can add a lot of style and sophistication to your animation. So here's our play blast. Okay, that's our basic walk. So we'll just put this aside for the moment. Okay, now I'm going to bring back the NURBS curves so we can select parts of the body. Now we want to start to get some opposing action in the body. What you'll notice is that the left leg is at the front when the right arm is at the front. And so that's a nice opposing action through the body, but we can make it more sophisticated and add more style to it. So the way we want to do that is we want to go to frame 17, where that left foot is forward, and now we can take the hips and give them a little bit of rotate Y. Because when a leg comes forward, the hips naturally curve to help that bone structure move forward without putting too much strain on the torso. So when we go back to our basic 3-panel setup, this is our perspective, and then this is our side view. So now we've done this, and what we want to do is take the rotate Y and then do the exact opposite on 1 and 33. So if we go to 1, we notice that at 17 it's at minus 12.96, so at 1 we would want it to be at, you know, roughly 13. I mean, it doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be pretty close. Then we can middle mouse drag this to 33, and that'll set our key there. And then we want to blow away all these keys in the middle, and then we want to flatten these tangents so we get a nice smooth interpolation. Now you'll notice that his hips start to have a little bit more sway in them. So that, and if it doesn't feel like quite enough, we can always raise it a little more, but there doesn't really need to be a ton happening in there to get the feel of just those hips doing their thing. Okay. So we've got a little bit of that going. Now what we want to do is we want to do the same thing with the upper torso, and this is where we really start to put attitude in our walks. Attitude is mostly carried in the head, the shoulders, and the hips. So we've got a little bit of sway in the hips. Now let's put the opposite sway in his chest, and again that's rotate Y. Only at frame 17, where the hips are rotated one way, the chest is going to be rotated in the opposite way. Okay, so when we look at it from the top, you can see that his shoulders are rotated counterclockwise and his hips are rotated clockwise. See, you can see that if you look at this rotation here versus this rotation here. Again, we'll just do the same thing. We can blow away these keys, pick these two, bring them down to about where they should be, about equidistant from the center line, flatten them out, and now what we'll see when we play it is that now our guy's got some shoulders happening. So that to me feels a little too strong, but you get the idea. He's got some motion in his hips and some motion in his shoulders. Now that goes back to what I was talking about pinning. If we look at our old piece here, you'll notice his whole middle torso here is all acting really as one big piece, and there's no motion within itself. So it feels like it's pinned to itself, like all those parts of his body are just glued together and there's no motion. There's no separateness of the motion between them. But when we play this now, we can start to see how that chest is rotating and the hips are rotating, and now the chest and the hips have become unpinned. They're not connected like they're made out of concrete. They're starting to move more like an organic being moves. So the problem is the hips and the shoulders aren't pinned, but his whole middle torso here, those two sections, they're pinned. Okay, so what we want to do is unpin them, and the best way to do that is what we want to do is we want to treat his spine B the same way as his chest, because it's connected to his chest, but to a lesser extent. So when we go to frame 17, we look at his chest. That's rotated in Y to 15. We can take this, rotate it in Y to maybe, I don't know, half that. Let's just try, yeah, something like that. And then again, we want to do the same to the other ends. Flatten the tangents. So now you can see how there's a little bit of motion in that spine B. But since the chest is built on top of the spine, the more we rotate this spine, we can see the more it rotates the chest too. And now we're just getting entirely too much twist in that chest. So I think the best thing to do is take the chest and just scale the whole thing down a little bit. Okay, so now we can see that the chest is twisted further than the spine. And now what we should have is something that's got a nice breakup of the shapes within the body, but a little bit more readability and a little bit less of overplayedness of it. Okay. Now, if we want to, we can also add an even lesser version of that to the spine A. But I think for the purposes of just seeing how, oops, keep choosing the wrong one. So just for the purposes of just seeing how that motion happens within his chest, that's probably sufficient. Okay, so when we look at that versus this, you can really see how one's, even by just adding that little bit of twist, one has just got, this one here just has so much more life to it than this. Okay, now it may feel that way because this one is moving more slowly, so let's play blast. Oops. Let's play blast this one as well, from roughly the same angle to really get the feel of it. Okay. So our man here on the left is a fairly stiff guy, whereas our man on the right here, he's got some style to him. He's got a little more attitude, a little more feel. Okay. So just with regards to the unending fixing and tweaking we need to do in animation, when I look back at this and I'm looking at that drag on the left hand, it feels like the drag on the left hand is coming off just a little bit too slowly from the point at which we can erase this, from the point at which it starts to drag back. So it's starting to drag back, but it takes a couple more frames to come back. So let's just fix that while we're here. Okay, so we just want that left hand. Oops. We just want that left hand to have W, so it can move in space. We just want that left hand to have a little bit more drag, a little sooner coming off that there. And I think that should help a lot. And then just make the whole thing nice and even. So now we play it. Actually, it's still too slow. Really, what we want is for the hand to start its drag from this point here. So we need to select both of these. And then when we bring them both down, we can see how that's helping there. And we want to do the same thing on the Z. Bring it maybe just up a little bit. So now when we play it and we look at that left hand, looks a little more natural. Feels a little better. So I suppose we could do the same thing to the right. The rotate Z is just a little extreme. Sorry, and that's the wrong place to do that. We want to do that here. That's 17. We want that to come up a bit. And then the rotate Y, we want that to come down a bit so it's hitting a little harder, a little faster. And now when we look at this, there we go. That drag looks a little more natural. Okay, so this would be a good time to save our work. and enjoy the fact that now that we've done the basic mechanics of a walk, we can really start to breathe some life into this guy and make him, for lack of a better term, animated.